My father's hand didn't just touch my chair, it grabbed it. Hard. Like the chair belonged to him and I was just occupying space he'd decided I no longer deserved. We were in the dining room of the house I grew up in. The same polished table. The same Christmas centerpiece my mother insisted on every year. The same fake warmth that hung in the air right before something ugly happened. I'd barely sat down when my father yanked my chair backward, so fast the legs scraped the hardwood. My body jolted. My shoulder hit the table edge. The plates rattled. The room went silent in that instant, the way it does when everyone feels violence but wants to pretend it's only family tension. My father pointed across the table at my sister. "That seat is for my real daughter," he said, loud enough that the cousins in the living room could hear. "Get out." For a second, I didn't move. Not because I was defiant, because my brain needed one heartbeat to accept that he'd just said that in front of everyone. My mother didn't stand up. She didn't tell him to stop. She stared at me like I'd done something wrong by existing. My sister smiled, small and satisfied, and slid into the seat as if it had been waiting for her all along. Like this was finally the order of things. No one spoke. Not my aunt, not my uncle, not the family friend who always said I was so strong. They all watched the way people watch a wreck they don't want to claim they saw. My father leaned closer, voice lower now, intimate in the worst way. "You don't get to sit here," he said. "You don't get to take up space. Not tonight." I felt heat in my face and a strange coldness in my hands. I could have screamed. I could have thrown something. I could have begged for someone, anyone, to say he was wrong. But I knew my family. I knew how this worked. If I cried, they'd call me unstable. If I yelled, they'd call me dangerous. If I begged, they'd call me pathetic. And my sister would watch it happen like she was watching a show she paid for. So I did the only thing that kept me from giving them what they wanted. I stood up slowly. I picked up my coat from the back of my chair. I looked at the table, at the wine glasses, the candles, the expensive plates my mother saved for special occasions. Then I looked at my father and said very calmly, "Merry Christmas." My sister's smile widened as if she'd won. My father didn't respond. He just sat back, satisfied, like he'd finally put me where he believed I belonged. I walked out of the dining room without rushing. I could feel people's eyes following me. I could hear someone inhale as if they might say something, and then decide not to. I grabbed my purse from the hallway table and stepped outside into the cold. The driveway lights made the snow glitter like glass. My breath came out in white clouds. Somewhere inside, I heard laughter start again, forced and shaky, like everyone was trying to pretend the moment hadn't happened. I sat in my car for a long time with my hands on the steering wheel, not turning the key. My shoulder ached where it hit the table. The pain wasn't dramatic. It was the kind that blossoms slowly, proof you can't ignore. I took out my phone and opened my camera. I didn't record a speech. I didn't rant. I didn't send a dramatic text. I took a photo of the red mark already forming near my collarbone where the table edge caught me. Then another photo from a different angle. Then I opened my notes app and typed 3 lines. Christmas dinner, chair pulled, shoulder hit table, witnesses present. I saved it with the timestamp. Then I drove to my apartment in silence, the radio off, the streetlights passing like a slow metronome. When I got home, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror and lifted my sleeve. The bruise was already darkening. I held my phone up and took one more photo with the bathroom clock visible in the reflection. Because if my father wanted to turn me into a story, I was going to make sure the story had dates. I slept maybe 2 hours. Not because I was crying, because my body kept replaying the scrape of the chair legs in the exact way my mother looked at me, blank, judgmental, certain. In the morning, I woke to a hard knock at my door, not a neighbor knock, not a delivery knock, a knock that sounded official. I pulled my robe tighter and opened the door. A man stood in the hallway holding an envelope and a clipboard. He didn't smile. He didn't introduce himself like a friend. He said, "Are you Brooke Carter?" "Yes," I answered, my voice steady. He held out the envelope. It was thick, official looking, with a return address printed in block letters. "Sign here, he said. My hand hovered over the clipboard for half a second. Then I signed. He tore off a slip, handed it to me, and walked away without another word. I closed my door and stood there staring at the envelope. The paper felt heavier than it should have. I looked at the return address, County Court Services. My stomach tightened. Because I hadn't filed anything yet, I hadn't reported anything, I hadn't called anyone. And still, there it was, an official envelope waiting for me the next morning. I opened it carefully. The first page had my name at the top and a case number underneath. Then I read the line that made my blood go cold. It said, my father had filed a petition, claiming I was a threat to the family, and requesting an emergency order against me. I stood in my kitchen with that petition in my hands until the paper stopped feeling like paper and started feeling like a trap. My father had written my name at the top like he owned it. Underneath, he had checked boxes that turned me into something dangerous. Immediate threat, unpredictable, violent outburst. He'd requested an emergency order that would keep me away from the family residence, away from my mother, away from my sister, and, most important, away from anything he could claim was family property. My eyes caught on the filing time. It was stamped late last night. After Christmas dinner, after he shoved me. He went home, poured himself another drink, and filed an emergency petition against me like it was a routine errand. The next page listed the hearing time. Today. Same day. I didn't have days to process. I didn't have time to melt down. I had hours to become a file that could survive him. I didn't text my mother. I didn't call my father. I put on jeans, a sweater, and a coat, then drove to urgent care the moment they opened. Because I knew one thing with absolute clarity. My father loved stories. Records beat stories. The clinic smelled like disinfectant and stale coffee. A TV played muted holiday commercials no one was watching. When the nurse called my name, I followed her down the hallway and lifted my sleeve without being asked. The bruise had bloomed overnight, dark and ugly against my skin. Her expression changed. What happened? She asked. My father grabbed my chair and shoved me, I said calmly. My shoulder hit the table. She didn't ask why. She didn't ask what I did to set him off. She wrote it down and took my blood pressure because that's what clinics do when you hand them something that needs to exist in ink. A physician's assistant came in, examined my shoulder, pressed gently along the tender line, and said, contusion, then paused. Any dizziness? Loss of consciousness? No, I said. Just pain. She nodded and typed. Do you feel safe going home? I hesitated, then answered honestly. I feel safer with documentation than without it. She printed discharge paperwork and handed it to me with a firm look. On the page, it said exactly what I needed it to say. Contusion consistent with blunt impact. Patient reports being shoved. I took a photo of it right there, in the hallway, not for drama, but for redundancy, because redundancy is what saves you when someone tries to make papers disappear. Then I drove straight to the courthouse. Not the big dramatic courthouse people imagine. County court, fluorescent lights, security checkpoint, a metal detector that beeped at my keys. The officer waved me through without looking at my face long enough to form an opinion, and I liked that. I found the clerk's window for protective orders and slid the petition under the glass. I was served this morning, I said. I need the full filing and any exhibits. The clerk, a woman with tired eyes and a practiced tone, typed the case number. Click, click. Her face didn't change, but her fingers slowed. Okay, she said. He filed for an emergency restraining order. I see that, I replied. I need the attachments. She clicked again, then reached into a tray and pulled out a packet. When she slid it under the window, I saw the first exhibit and felt my stomach tighten. A screenshot of a text message. It was supposedly from me. It said, if she takes my seat, I'll make her regret it. My father had labeled it threat. He'd underlined it in pen like he was grading homework. I stared at the screenshot and felt something cold settle behind my ribs because the text wasn't just false, it was sloppy. The timestamp format was wrong for my phone. The battery icon didn't match the current operating system, and the contact photo at the top, my photo, was a picture of me from years ago, from before I cut my hair and changed my number. It was the kind of fake you create when you think the court won't look too closely. I looked up at the clerk. Can I submit my response today? I asked. Yes, she said, but the judge may still issue a temporary order if he believes there's immediate danger. I have medical documentation, I said, and I have a reason to believe the exhibits are fabricated. Her eyes flicked to my shoulder, then back to my face. She slid another form under the glass. Fill this out, she said, and you can attach anything you want the judge to see. I sat on a plastic bench and wrote my response in short sentences. No emotion, no speeches, just facts. He shoved my chair. I hit the table. Bruise documented. I left immediately. No threats, no violence. Petition contains false exhibits. Then I attached what mattered. Photos with timestamps and the urgent care paperwork. When I returned to the clerk, she stapled it and stamped it with today's date. That stamp felt like oxygen. I checked the hearing room number. Then I saw my father. He was already there, leaning against the hallway wall like the courthouse belonged to him. My mother stood beside him, face soft and wounded, dressed like she'd come to church. My sister, Claire, was behind them, lips curved in the same smirk she'd worn when she took my seat. And next to them stood a man in a navy suit with a briefcase. An attorney. Of course they had an attorney. My father saw me and smiled, small and satisfied, like this was the moment he'd been building toward. A public proceeding where he could call me unstable and have it stamped. I didn't walk toward them. I walked past them because proximity is permission. My father called after me anyway. You didn't have to do this, he said, loud enough for people to hear. We're trying to help you. I didn't turn around. I sat in the hearing room on the respondent's side and kept my folder on my lap. When the judge came in, everyone rose. My father's lawyer spoke first, smooth and practiced, calling my father concerned and me volatile. My mother dabbed at dry eyes like she'd rehearsed it in a mirror. Claire stared at me like I was entertainment. Then the judge looked at my father and asked a simple question. What happened at dinner? He said. My father's voice took on that careful, righteous tone he used when he wanted to sound reasonable. She got aggressive, he said. She lunged at her sister. I had to move her away. The lie landed cleanly in the air, too clean, because he'd prepared it. The judge turned to me. Ms. Carter, he said, did you threaten them? No, I said. I left. Do you have evidence? He asked. Yes, I replied, and stood. Medical documentation of my injury from last night. I handed it to the bailiff, who carried it to the judge. The judge read it without expression. Then he glanced at the screenshot exhibit and frowned. He looked at my father. You're asserting she was physically aggressive, he said. Yet this medical document indicates she has an injury consistent with impact. My father's lawyer jumped in. She could have injured herself after leaving, he said quickly. The judge didn't respond to the lawyer right away. He kept reading. Then he paused and his eyes went back to the first page of the petition, to a specific line in the address section. He looked up slowly, not at me, at my father. Mr. Carter, he said, voice suddenly sharper. Your petition lists Ms. Carter's current apartment address. My pulse tightened because I'd never given my parents my new address. The judge tapped the paper once. You also filed this petition late last night, he added. So I'll ask you directly. He leaned forward. How did you obtain her current address? My father's smile didn't break when the judge asked how he got my address. It just got tighter, like a belt pulled one notch too far. He glanced at his attorney, expecting rescue. The attorney hesitated, then stood as if he could speak the truth into something softer. Your Honor, he began, my client was concerned for his daughter's safety. He has reason to believe she's been... The judge held up one hand. I asked Mr. Carter a direct question. He said, Mr. Carter will answer it. The room went very quiet. My father's mouth opened, closed, opened again. She's my daughter, he said finally, like bloodline was a legal explanation. I know where she lives. The judge didn't blink. No, he replied. You know where she lived years ago. This petition lists her current apartment address. How did you obtain it? My father's jaw flexed. His eyes flicked toward my mother, then away. My mother's expression stayed perfectly blank, her favorite face when she wanted to look innocent while someone else did the dirty work. My father cleared his throat. We received mail, he said. I felt the cold settle deeper. Mail, the judge repeated. From where? My father's lawyer tried again. Your Honor, families often. Stop, the judge said, and the word landed like a gavel, even without the gavel. Mr. Carter, answer. My father's voice sharpened, defensive now. She's on our family accounts, he said. Medical, insurance, emergency contacts. She doesn't need to be dramatic about it. The judge leaned forward slightly. Which account? He asked. My father hesitated again. That hesitation was the crack. Because family accounts is what people say when they're hoping no one asks for a receipt. I stood very still on my side of the room. I didn't argue. I didn't shake my head. I didn't do anything that could be labeled emotional. I just waited for the judge to do what judges do when someone is dancing around a fact. The judge turned to the clerk. Do we have the proof of service? He asked. The clerk nodded. Yes, Your Honor. The judge tapped the petition once with his pen. This address did not appear by magic, he said. Mr. Carter, did you file a change of address request with the Postal Service in your daughter's name? My father blinked, and for the first time all morning, the mask slipped. My mother's eyes widened just a fraction. My sister's smirk faded into something more cautious, like she'd suddenly realized she might be standing too close to the fire. That's ridiculous, Martials, my father said. Why would I do that? The judge's voice stayed calm. Because it would cause mail to route to you, he replied. And it would give you leverage, so I'm asking again. My father swallowed. No, he said quickly. The judge nodded once, then shifted to something else without warning. Exhibit 1, he said, holding up the screenshot of the alleged threat. This message. You're claiming this came from Ms. Carter? Yes, my father said, eager to move to familiar ground. She threatened my other daughter. We were afraid. The judge's eyes didn't soften. How did you obtain the screenshot? He asked. My father's lawyer stepped in. Your Honor, the family. The judge cut him off with a look. I'm not asking the family. He said, I am asking the filer of this petition. My father's cheeks flushed. My wife took it, he said. My mother's head snapped up. She started. The judge held up one finger. You will speak when I ask you, he said to her, then looked back at my father. From whose phone? My father's mouth tightened. From my wife's, he said. The judge nodded again, slow. So the alleged threat was sent to your wife's phone, he said. Yet this screenshot shows a contact photo in formatting that appears inconsistent with current messaging display. My father's lawyer smiled thinly, trying to turn it into nothing. Your Honor, with respect, formatting is hardly. The judge's pen stopped moving. It's not hardly anything when someone is asking me for an emergency order, he said. Emergency orders are granted on credibility. My father's smile died fully at that. The judge looked down at my response packet again. The photos, the urgent care note, the clean stamped filing. Then he looked back up at my father. You're alleging she lunged at her sister, he said. And yet she has a documented bruise consistent with impact. She left immediately. There is no police report from you last night. There is no medical record for your other daughter. There is a screenshot that may not be authentic. My father's nostrils flared. The judge continued, voice steady. And you have listed an address that the respondent states you did not have. My father's lawyer opened his mouth, but the judge didn't give him the space. I'm going to take a brief recess, the judge said. When we return, I will rule on temporary relief. In the meantime, Mr. Carter, you will be prepared to provide a clear explanation of how you obtained that address. If your explanation involves any formal request made under her name, understand that you are now creating a second record in front of me. He paused and let the last words sink in. In this courtroom, he added, records matter. The bailiff called, all rise, and the judge stepped out through the side door. People stood, then sat again in the weird, restless way courthouse hallways breed. My father leaned close to his attorney and hissed something I couldn't hear. My mother's hand pressed lightly against his arm like she was trying to keep him from losing control in public. My sister pulled out her phone, thumbs moving fast. And then my phone buzzed. A message from a number I didn't recognize. Unknown. Are you in courtroom 4? It's about your grandfather's trust. Do not leave. My stomach tightened. My grandfather's trust. That wasn't a phrase my parents liked me hearing. I didn't answer the message. I didn't look around like prey. I just kept my face neutral and my folder closed. Because the one thing I had learned from my parents was that panic is a performance they can use against you. The side door opened again and the bailiff stepped out. But it wasn't the judge coming back. It was a clerk carrying a sealed envelope, thicker than the petition packet, stamped with an official seal, moving straight toward the bench like it had a destination. Behind her walked a man in a black suit. Not my father's attorney. Not a courthouse security officer. A man who carried himself like he didn't need permission to enter the record. He approached the clerk, handed her one document, and spoke quietly. The clerk's expression changed in a way that made my skin go cold. She glanced down at the top line, then up at the name, then immediately turned and placed it on the judge's bench, right where the court record lived. My father saw it happen. His head snapped toward the bench like a dog hearing a whistle only it could hear. His attorney went still. My mother's face drained of color, and my sister's phone slipped slightly in her hand, her smirk finally gone, because whatever was in. That envelope wasn't family drama. It was something official. Something my grandfather had arranged before he died. And if the timing was what I suspected, it meant my father hadn't just shoved me out of a chair last night. He'd triggered something he didn't know existed. When the bailiff called us back to order, the air in the room felt different. Not louder, not calmer. Just sharper. Like everyone had realized this hearing was no longer about feelings. It was about what could be proven on paper. The judge came in and sat without looking at anyone at first. He put his glasses on, reached for the file, and then paused when he saw the sealed envelope on the bench. His eyes moved to the clerk. "What is that?" he asked. The clerk stood. "Filed during recess, Your Honor," she said. "Delivered by Mr. Elias Grant." The man in the black suit rose smoothly from the front row. He didn't fidget. He didn't smile. He simply waited to be recognized like he understood how records are made. The judge looked at him. "State your name and your purpose," he said. "Elias Grant," the man replied. "Attorney for Shoreline Trust Company, acting trustee for the Harold Carter Family Trust." My father's lawyer went still at counsel table. My mother's face tightened like she'd tasted something bitter. My father's eyes fixed on the envelope as if he could burn a hole through it. The judge glanced down at the seal again. "And why is a trust company inserting itself into a protective order hearing?" he asked. Mr. Grant's voice stayed calm. "Because this petition references the family residence as the protected address," he said. "That residence is not owned by the petitioners. It is trust property." The room went quiet in a way that made my skin tighten. The judge looked up slowly. "Are you asserting the petitioners have misrepresented ownership to this court?" he asked. "I am asserting," Mr. Grant said, "that the trust holds title, and that the trust contains a trigger provision involving false allegations and attempts to bar Ms. Brooke Carter from trust property." My father's mouth opened. "That's—" he started. The judge lifted a hand. "You will not speak," he said, then turned back to Mr. Grant. "Hand it to the clerk," he ordered. Mr. Grant approached the clerk and gave her the document. The clerk carried it to the bench. The judge broke the seal with one careful motion and read the first page. I watched his face change as his eyes moved down the lines. Not shocked. Annoyed. The kind of annoyance that comes when someone wastes the court's time with a story that collapses under one certified paragraph. The judge looked up at my father. "Mr. Carter," he said, "this is a certification of trust and a recorded deed." He tapped the page once. "It lists the family residence at the address you are claiming to protect," he added. "And it states the title is held by the Harold Carter Family Trust." My father's jaw clenched. "My father would never," he began. The judge cut him off. "He did," he said, "and it is recorded." He turned one more page and read again, then looked at me. "Ms. Carter," he said, "this certification lists you as successor trustee." My throat tightened. "I didn't know that," I said quietly. Mr. Grant spoke again. "Mr. Harold Carter amended his trust prior to his death," he said. "He removed his son from any authority. He named Ms. Brooke Carter as successor trustee and primary beneficiary." My sister's head snapped up. Primary beneficiary. That was the kind of phrase that changes a family's blood pressure. My father's attorney finally stood, voice controlled but strained. "Your Honor, even if a trust exists, that does not automatically—" The judge held up his hand. "Counsel," he said, "I am still dealing with an emergency petition that asks me to believe your client is a victim." He tapped the protective order petition on the bench. "This petition seeks to bar Ms. Carter from a residence your client does not own." He continued, "That directly affects credibility." My father's face flushed. "We live there," he said sharply. "It's our home." Mr. Grant didn't look at my father when he replied. He looked at the judge. "The trust grants them limited occupancy rights," he said. "Conditional occupancy, not ownership. And those rights are subject to termination if the trust's trigger conditions are met." The judge's eyes narrowed. "Trigger condition," he repeated. "Explain." Mr. Grant's tone stayed clinical. "Mr. Carter included a clause," he said. "If Daniel Carter or Marlene Carter attempt to remove Ms. Brooke Carter from trust property by force, intimidation, or misuse of legal process, their occupancy rights are suspended pending review, and any discretionary distributions to them are frozen." My mother's lips parted. "That's not real," she whispered, but it sounded weak in the face of paper. The judge looked down again and kept reading. Then he paused on a line and his pen stopped moving. He looked up at my father and asked, "Did you shove her last night?" My father's expression turned offended. "No," he said. "She was aggressive." The judge didn't argue. He simply lifted the urgent care note from my response packet, held it up, and said, "This record exists." Then he lifted the trust certification, held it beside it, and said, "And this record exists." He leaned forward slightly. "So let me tell you what I am not going to do," he said. "I am not going to issue an emergency order against Ms. Carter based on questionable exhibits when you have now been caught misrepresenting the status of the very property you claim to protect." My father's attorney began, "Your Honor." "No," the judge said, and the single word killed the room. He turned to the clerk. "Mark the trust certification as a court exhibit attached to the file," he ordered, "and note for the record that ownership claims in the petition are disputed by a recorded deed." The clerk typed quickly. The judge looked at Mr. Grant. "Are you requesting action today?" he asked. Mr. Grant nodded once. "Yes, Your Honor," he said. "We are providing formal notice that the trustee is freezing discretionary distributions and initiating an occupancy review due to the misuse of this court filing." He handed a second document to the clerk. "This is notice to the petitioners," he added, "required under the trust." The clerk took it. My mother's face tightened as if she knew exactly what that notice would say. The judge turned back to my father. "Now," he said, "we return to your alleged evidence." He lifted the screenshot again. "Do you have the original device this came from?" he asked. My father's mouth tightened. "No," he said. "It's not necessary." The judge's eyes sharpened. "It is necessary," he replied. "If you're asking me to restrain someone's freedom based on a threat, you will produce the underlying evidence." My father's attorney tried to salvage it. "Your Honor, we can provide it later." "No," the judge said. "Today." He looked directly at my father. Mr. Carter, he said, you will provide the original phone to the clerk for imaging by the end of business today, or I will refer this petition for review as a potential false filing. My father's cheeks reddened. His confidence was gone now, replaced by a hard, brittle anger. And before you answer, the judge added, understand that your answer is now part of a record that will be shared with the trustee and, if necessary, law enforcement. My father's throat worked. This is a witch hunt, he snapped. The judge didn't react emotionally. He simply nodded once, as if acknowledging a tantrum. Then he looked at me. Ms. Carter, he said, based on the inconsistencies and your documentation, I am denying the petitioner's request for an emergency order against you. My lungs loosened slightly. Not relief. Permission to breathe. And, the judge continued, I am issuing a temporary mutual no-contact order for the next 72 hours regarding the trust property and any communications tied to this dispute. All contact goes through counsel or the trustee. My mother's eyes widened. Mutual, she said, like she couldn't believe she'd been placed on the same level as me. The judge didn't look at her. Yes, he said, because I am stopping the temperature from rising while the facts are preserved. He tapped the petition one more time. Now, he said, we address the address. My father stiffened again. The judge leaned forward and asked, slower this time, how did you obtain Miss Carter's current apartment address? My father's mouth opened, and I watched him make a decision in real time. He could lie. Or he could admit the thing that was going to look worse on paper than it did in his head. We had mail forwarded, he said finally, voice tight. It's not illegal. The room went silent again. Because it didn't matter whether he believed it was illegal. It mattered that he just confessed to controlling my mail like it was a family right. The judge's pen moved once, writing something I couldn't see. Then he looked at Mr. Grant. Trustee counsel, he said. You heard that. Mr. Grant nodded. Yes, Your Honor, he said, and the trustee will take appropriate action to protect trust communications. The judge turned back to my father. Mr. Carter, he said, you have escalated a Christmas dinner into an emergency court filing, you have provided questionable exhibits, and you have admitted to forwarding the respondent's mail. He paused. You will remain in this courtroom after Ms. Carter is excused, he said, because I am not done making sure this record is clean. Then he looked at me. Ms. Carter, he said, do not go back to that house alone. The bailiff stepped closer to my table, ready to escort me out. As I stood, my phone buzzed with a new message from my sister. It was just 6 words. Dad says you're stealing everything. And in the same second, I watched my father reach for his phone, his knuckles white, like he was about to fire off another story before the ink on today's record had even dried. The bailiff walked me out first, just like the judge said. Not because I was fragile. Because my father was the kind of man who saved his worst behavior for hallways, where there were no microphones, no court reporter, and no consequences unless someone decided to make one. I didn't look back as I left the hearing room. I kept my eyes forward, my folder held tight against my ribs, my steps even. In the corridor, Mr. Elias Grant caught up beside me with the controlled pace of someone who never rushes but never wastes time, either. Ms. Carter, he said quietly, the trustee is activating the freeze immediately. I didn't stop walking. What does that mean today? I asked. It means, he replied, no discretionary distributions to Daniel or Marlene, no access to trust funds for expenses, and an occupancy review notice will be served before the end of business. Served how? I asked. His tone stayed clinical. A process server, he said. And if they refuse to comply, the trustee petitions the court. I nodded once. They'll refuse, I said. I expect they will, he replied without a hint of surprise. That's why your grandfather wrote it the way he did. We reached the clerk's window where the judge's temporary orders were already being printed. The clerk slid a copy under the glass. Mutual no contact. 72 hours. All communication through counsel or trustee. Denial of emergency relief against me. A clean record. I took it, and it felt like a door locking behind me. Mr. Grant handed me another envelope. This is the trust notice, he said. It's being served on them. You're receiving a courtesy copy as successor trustee. I looked down and saw the words that made my throat tighten again. Notice of suspension of occupancy rights. Pending review. My father had shoved me out of a chair like he owned the house. My grandfather had written a clause that treated that shove like what it was, a trigger. As I was reading, I heard my father's voice rise behind us, sharp and furious. You can't do this! He snapped at someone. Probably his attorney, probably the clerk, probably the heir. I didn't turn around, because turning around was what my father always wanted. Turning around meant engagement. Engagement meant opportunity. Mr. Grant's voice dropped lower. His voice dropped. One more thing, he said. The judge's clerk is documenting your father's admission about mail forwarding. The trustee will use that to redirect all trust communications away from the house immediately. My stomach tightened. So he won't get my mail anymore, I said. No, Mr. Grant replied. Not if we can help it. I stepped away from the counter and started toward the exit. That's when my sister appeared in the hallway, moving fast, face tight. Brooke, she said, breathless, like she'd been running after me for the first time in years. Dad says you're stealing everything. I stopped then, not because I owed her an explanation, but because the lie had her by the throat and she didn't even know it. I'm not stealing anything, I said calmly. Grandpa set this up. Legally. Recorded. Her eyes flicked to the envelope in my hands. What is that? A notice, I said. That Dad and Mom might lose the right to live in the house if they keep using the court to attack me. Her face changed. Lose the right? She whispered, like the concept had never existed in her universe. I watched her swallow. He told me you were unstable, she said, quieter now. He said you threatened me. I held her gaze. If I had threatened you, I said, there would be a real report from last night. There isn't. There's a fake screenshot and a bruise on my shoulder. Her eyes dropped to my collarbone where the bruise was still visible above my sweater. Something flickered there. Confusion first, then anger, then fear. Claire, I said, keeping my voice steady. Did you authorize anything for the trust or the house? Any mail forwarding? Any legal paperwork? She shook her head quickly. No, she said. He just tells me what to do. He said it was for taxes. He said it was for your own good. I nodded once. Then don't sign anything else, I said. And don't let him use your name. Before she could answer, my phone buzzed. A new email from Mr. Grant's office. Property access protocol attached. Deputy escort arranged. I didn't feel triumphant reading it. I felt tired. But I also felt something I hadn't felt after a holiday with my family in a long time. Control. That afternoon, a deputy met me in the courthouse lobby. No sirens, no drama. Just a uniform and a clipboard and a simple sentence. We're escorting you to retrieve personal property, he said. You're not going alone. On the drive to the house, I watched winter trees blur past the window and kept my breathing slow. Not because I was afraid of them, because I refused to give my body to their chaos. When we pulled into the driveway, my father's truck was there. The deputy got out first. I followed with my folder and the trust notice. My mother opened the front door before we even knocked. She was smiling, soft and wounded, like she was about to tell the deputy how hard this had been on her. Then she saw the papers in my hands. Her smile froze. My father appeared behind her, face already red, jaw tight. What is this? He demanded. You brought the police to our home? The deputy's tone was neutral. Ma'am, sir, we're here to keep the peace while Ms. Carter retrieves her belongings, he said. No contact orders in effect. Keep distance. My father's eyes snapped to me. This is insane, he hissed. After everything we've done for you. I didn't answer him. I handed the trust notice to the deputy. He read the header, then looked at my father. This is a trust property notice, he said. It states, occupancy rights are suspended pending review. My father laughed, sharp and disbelieving. That's not enforceable, he said. We live here. The deputy didn't argue. He just held the paper higher and read one line out loud, slow so there was no misunderstanding. Misuse of legal process to remove. Brooke Carter from trust property triggers suspension. My mother went pale because she heard the word triggers and understood finally that my grandfather had planned for exactly what happened last night. My father stepped forward like he was going to overpower the moment with volume. The deputy lifted one hand. "Sir," he said, "do not approach her." My father stopped, shaking with rage. "You think you're going to take the house?" He spat. "You think you're going to take Christmas away from us and walk out with everything?" I met his eyes and kept my voice low. "I didn't take anything," I said. "You shoved me. You filed a false petition. You tried to make the court restrain me from a house you don't own." My father's face twisted. "It's my father's house." "It's my grandfather's trust," I corrected. "And the record says what it says." I walked past them with the deputy at my side and went upstairs to my old room. I packed the things that were mine: documents, photos, small items I'd left behind because I never thought I'd need to prove I existed. When I came back down, my mother was standing very still, hands clenched at her sides. My father was staring at the trust notice like he could rewrite it by force. Outside, a car pulled into the driveway. A process server stepped out with another envelope. He approached my father first. "Daniel Carter?" he asked. My father's mouth opened, ready to deny his own name out of spite. The process server didn't wait for the performance. He handed it over and said, "You've been served." My father looked down at the envelope. My mother leaned in to read it. And I watched the exact moment their faces changed, when they saw the trustee's seal and the bold line beneath it. Discretionary distributions suspended. Effective immediately. The money they'd always used to control the room was no longer theirs to reach for, not because I begged, because a record activated. The deputy spoke once, calm and final. "Ms. Carter, do you have everything you came for?" "Yes," I said. We walked back to my car without another word. My father didn't follow. He couldn't. The no contact order was a wall, and for once he didn't get to pretend walls were optional. That evening, Mr. Grant emailed me the trustee's confirmation: all trust communications redirected, mail forwarding reversed, distributions frozen pending review, and a formal hearing scheduled to determine whether my parents' occupancy would be terminated. And in the middle of it, one sentence sat like a quiet verdict. Title remains held by the Harold Carter Family Trust. Brooke Carter is successor trustee and primary beneficiary as amended and recorded. It was explicit. It was clean. It was undeniable. My father could call me not real at a dinner table, but he couldn't unrecord a deed. He couldn't unfile a trust amendment. And he couldn't shove his way through a system built to remember